I'm Annalee Davis, and this is White Creole Conversations, new ways of thinking about whiteness in a Caribbean context. And today I'm in conversation with Nicky Marshall, who's joining the platform to be able to contribute to ideas around whiteness in the Caribbean. So, Nicky, thanks for being here. Can you just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, kind of work you're doing, thinking about defining yourself in terms of race, class, and nationality? If you identify with the term white Creole, thinking about how far you can also trace your family back on either maternal or maternal line. So just thinking about the context for how you define yourself in Barbados.
Yeah. Well, my name is Nicky Marshall. My age is 42, and I work as a pastor full-time and a counselor. I would define myself as a white middle-class Barbadian. White Creole, I've never really thought of myself as Creole. I suppose I would see Caribbean culture as Creole, so I guess within that context, yes. But that's not, I would just call myself a white person if somebody asked me. My dad has traced our family back to a pair of brothers that came over in 16 something.
Okay.
So he's gone pretty far back, and they came over from England. Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about, I'm interested in what primary and secondary school experiences are like in Barbados and how that kind of shapes a little bit of who we are and how we see ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about what your primary school experience felt like?
Primary was pretty good. I went to St. Gabriel's, which is a private primary school. So, it was fairly evenly mixed racially, and I guess more kind of middle class kids. So I felt, quite comfortable. I wouldn't say I was particularly conscious of being white there. It was when I went to secondary school that I really became conscious of, I was daily reminded that I was a white person. I went to Colmar, and I was the only white person that went that year in the first form. I was the only white person in all the first forms, and there was a white guy in third and one in fifth. So I was, and none of my friends from St. Gabriel's went with me. So I kind of had to start from scratch at Colmar, and I think that's really where a kind of a racial self-consciousness developed, both from students and from teachers. I was constantly reminded that I was white.
So how do those reminders kind of manifest themselves?
Well, anyone who didn't know my name, I was white boy. That's how I was addressed. So, and then just things that I remember, like history class, we were taught by a Rastafarian lady, and I think that she would say things like, I remember once she said, we were talking about religion, and she said, well, everyone should be able to imagine God in their own race. Right, Mr. Marshall?
Right.
And single me out in front of the class, that kind of thing. I remember once in a class I was just messing around with a friend of mine who was black, and we were just giving trouble. And the teacher addressed him, not me, and said, you do your work, don't mind him, he knows where his bread is buttered.
Right.
Those kinds of comments, especially coming from teachers, are difficult. And it's just a reminder that I'm not just another kid at school.
Right.
I'm viewed differently by students and by staff.
Right.
So, and I think that sense of racial self-consciousness has stuck with me to 42 years old. I don't think that's ever gone away.
Right. So how were you able to develop relationships with people in the school at all?
Yeah,
I mean,
I had a couple of good friends, um, and yeah, I mean, we're still friends to today.
okay.
So yeah,
So it created a space where you felt as though you could belong with some people in that context, and that happened outside of school as well as within school.
yeah,
Yeah.
it did. You know, it was weird though because I remember the first, like, I made one good friend. He's black, and we became very close. But I remember the first time he came to over to my house outside of school. It was very awkward. It felt very strange, and that took a while to get over. You know, and I remember that it surprised me. You know,
And so was that awkwardness felt by both of you, or was it an awkwardness because it was so unusual to have a black person in your home?
I think I can't speak for him, but I think he felt a little strange too. But um, yeah, I think it was having some, you know, and he was like a black person, but from like a village kind of, you
Right.
know,
So from
not
a different class as
different
well.
class as well. And I
Yeah.
think that was really what made it a little awkward. You know?
And so would your family obviously was open to you socializing with people
Yeah,
from
yeah,
different
my family was
races,
fine
so
with that.
they
Yeah,
were fine with that.
yeah.
Um, so I wonder if because you have a child who's in secondary school, whether the experience you had, which would probably be over 30 years ago,
Yeah.
whether the experience you had as being a minority in the secondary school system is being mirrored by his experience.
He hasn't said anything to me, so I don't know. Certainly, he went into secondary school with a lot of friends from his school, and I noticed that at St. Michael's, where he's at, there are a lot more white kids than when I was at school. So, you know, but when I see him hanging out after school and stuff, he's not really hanging out with the white kids so much. So he hasn't said anything to me. I don't know if things have been said to him.
Would you have, at his age, would you have spoken about that with your family? Would you have had the language to be able to express the way in which you were pointed out by the teachers or by the students? Is that something that you would have discussed, or you would have kept that to yourself?
I kept it to myself.
Yeah.
I hated school. I hated going. But I didn't talk to my parents about that.
Right. Yeah.
My dad was very insistent. I actually wanted to go to Foundation because that's where my friends were going. But my dad insisted I go to Comamere because he said that I would learn to interact with people who I will have to be working with, kind of thing, like
Right.
all different kinds of people.
Right.
Which I think was wise because I think one of the things I learned too is how white people are viewed, some of the stereotypes that are placed on white people. I kind of became more aware of that too. And I think that was helpful.
And what were those? What were some of those stereotypes? Can you remember?
I think there was a general feeling that white people have a sense of entitlement, a sense of certainly wealthy white people definitely had money. If you were white, you had money. That was just assumed. But also that you were racist and that you presumed power and authority.
Right. Okay. Okay. So coming out of that, would you say that there's a sense of any kind of interior conflict or internal conflict in Barbados as a result of race? Do you kind of grapple with ideas around, I guess there might be a schism between the way you experience the world and the way you see yourself and the way that other people were seeing you in those formative years. So does that result in any form of kind of internal conflict, or is it something that you think about?
Yeah. Yeah, I think about it all the time. I feel displaced. I feel that I feel that white Barbadians are not viewed by black Barbadians as real Barbadians. And so I feel that I don't feel fully accepted by black Barbadian society, and I don't feel that not accepted and not even welcome. And so I feel as though, and I think coming out of that, I kind of feel like I'm at home and not at home at the same time, all
Right.
the time. So I feel like a sort of like if I'm an expat who's lived here for many years, but doesn't ever really quite belong.
And how does that happen? Like, having left secondary school a long time ago, where does that experience play out? I mean, is it going into the bank? Is it in the supermarket? Is it, where does that sense of not belonging or not being accepted, how does that manifest itself?
Anytime I'm in a situation where there are a number of black people around, I assume I'm not welcomed or
Right.
Unfairly. I mean, that may not be so. It's just how I feel. I just feel this sense of being viewed as the enemy. I mean, I've heard those words being used. I remember a couple of situations. One when I was at school, where I was teasing a girl, just playing around, and she turned to me and she said, at that time Tom Adams was prime minister, and I guess she saw him as white. She said, we're only something along the lines of, we're only giving, don't mind Tom, we're only giving you all a break kind of thing, to be around for now kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And strangely, up till now, I went to see a doctor recently, and he's black. He was talking to a black Barbadian. He lives overseas, and I was sitting outside the office and I could hear their conversation, but they didn't know. And she was talking about a business she was in, and her competitor was white. And he said to her, well, it's good to get to know her because you have to know how the enemy thinks.
Right.
And it surprised me to hear that in 2000, that would have been like 2012. Mm-hmm. And then just the other day I was watching Crop Over go through, and two of the bands had the color black in, and both said this is to represent the people of Barbados, the color black. Mm-hmm. And I thought, so white people aren't really
right.
Barbadians. It's interesting. It doesn't seem to go away.
Right. So I guess I'd be interested in asking, how does it go away? Like, how do we move beyond prejudice or move beyond that sense of what makes us separate? I mean, in your personal or professional life, is there any level of integration across race?
A small amount, yes.
Right.
A small amount. Like in the church that I'm a pastor in the living room. That church started as a small group of people meeting in a home, white people. And as the church has grown, it's grown almost exclusively with white people.
Right.
Which to me is just another, it just shows how Barbadian society is still so segregated. Watching Kaduna, Blue Box Car is the white people band, So I remember reading once that, Barbadian society still mirrors the plantation in that we work together, but we play separately. And I think that's still very much true.
So how is it then, or why is it that an entity like the living room, because I'm interested, how is it that we can go to a wedding and almost everybody at that wedding is white or everybody at that wedding is black? Mm-hmm. How do we move beyond that position? How does the living room concern itself with issues? Like, does it want to be a more diverse space? Does it actively want to be inclusive? to people of other races in Barbados? Is it something that's not even considered? It just feels so natural? Is it a safe space to worship? Like, how do we, would anybody in there want it to be an integrated space, or would that become a problem in that, I guess, in that community?
I find that it's wanted, but it's so hard to get there. Like I mean, we have a few black members, and they really, I think, have had to kind of push through to stick around. And I've noticed that black people will come to visit, and people will go out of their way to welcome them, but inevitably they don't come back. And I've heard them, and I've heard some have said, well, this is a white church. I don't belong here. And some of our black members say that they also get a lot of pressure from black friends for being part of a quote unquote white church. So there's a lot of social pressure to not go to a church that is mostly white,
Right.
From black people.
Right.
That idea that you don't belong there is reinforced, I think, from both sides. Certainly speaking as a leader and knowing the other leaders well, we have always wanted the living room to be more diverse. But we've just found it very difficult to get there.
So I guess I would ask, why would members want it to be more diverse, and what can you kind of aggressively do to change that? Like, how can you move to that?
I've thought about this since I was at school, like how can we move past this whole thing? The only answer I've come up with is one relationship at a time, and I can only do my part. I can only do my part on an individual basis. Certainly we talk about it, at church we talk about breaking down those racial barriers and moving beyond that. I get, but at the end of the day, people have to be willing to just do it.
Right.
And we can't force anyone to do anything. I don't even know how much it is that people are unwilling, or that people just aren't in contact with black people that much, or that intimately to say, hey, would you want to come and visit our church, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Can you talk about kind of the opposite of not feeling that you belong? Is there are there ways in which you feel that that you belong, or that you're accepted as a Barbadian? How do you feel, or do you feel, if connected at all to the idea of being a Barbadian? Does it matter?
It definitely matters. I think I feel most connected to Barbados when I'm away from Barbados. I feel a deep connection to the land, strangely, to the actual physical land. So I think I feel, though I don't feel accepted by the people, I feel a part of the actual physical land of Barbados.
Right. Yeah.
I have rocks from the East Coast in my office and a little sculpture that makes me, I just feel this connection to Barbados as a place.
Mm-hmm.
The ocean, just everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking out at your mahogany trees, and that reminds me of primary school. I'm peeling off the little mahogany bits, and I just feel that sense of closeness to Barbados as a landscape. So that makes me feel connected.
And what is it that creates a connection when you're out of the island?
I guess because if I'm in America, I'm clearly not American. So, and when I'm there, people, oh, your accent, or oh, where are you from? Oh, where is that? And, so then you feel like you can sort of represent your country authentically.
Right. So being in obviously being in a space where you're part of the majority racially doesn't make you feel as though you connect.
it makes me feel like I can relax because nobody notices that I'm white,
Right.
so I can just relax. And I guess growing up through music, I've surfed all my life, which is kind of a North American thing originally. And the music that I listen to, I still have a connection to American culture. And that's been strengthened with the internet and with art, because I find the art scene here is very boring, so I look overseas for inspiration. So I feel a sense of connection there as well, strangely. So I guess I feel like I'm a bit of both in some way.
And is there something that I guess binds Barbadian society together beyond race? Is there any kind of cohesion, or is that just a kind of a myth? Is there something like a national Barbadian identity that you think many Barbadians connect to at some level, or not necessarily? Like, is there a national identity that supersedes race, where race isn't? Are there times where you may feel connected to a Barbadian or a Caribbean experience that is able to, I guess, breach the divisions of race that we're so accustomed to?
No, I feel like there are two Barbados. There's a white Barbados, there's a black Barbados. And there's sort of something in between there too. I think there's, I guess you would call it a brown Barbados, the sort of middle upper class black Barbadian that probably does not relate to, a village lifestyle either. And I think those are very different. Those groups have very different ideas about what being Barbadian is, I think.
So they exist parallel, side by side.
I think there's overlap, and there's, like if you have the concentric, these circles, there's some overlap, but yeah, I think they live side by side. They work together. We're very orderly. Obviously, we're not a society that's given to class violence or anything, so things just chug along. Yeah.
So, would you want to see the space differently? Like, how can we imagine a different kind of future? I mean, if we're not entirely happy with the way things are, and we want something to change, what is it that we want it to change into? Like, would you want to envisage Barbadian society feels differently in terms of racial engagement? Like, what would that be like? Like, what kind of a future would you want that's different than the secondary school experience that you had, or what would you want different moving forward? What would Barbadian society look for, and how can we make that? Like, what are the steps to moving beyond prejudice? How do we actually do that?
I think the only way is meaningful interaction. I think it's when you have a close white friend, if you're black, or if you're white and you have a close black friend, it becomes more difficult to see each other in terms of stereotypes. But I think a lot of these things are reinforced from our parents and from our families. And yeah, I don't really know. That's why I say I can only go one relationship at a time. I can only train my children. I don't feel like I can fix the society. I can only fix what's directly around me.
In your immediate circle.
Yeah.
So, do you have conversations with your children at all? Is this something that you would speak about in terms of, how do we, so what is that? I guess I'm trying to figure out, what does that meaningful interaction, how does that happen? Where does it happen? Where does it begin? like it seems so huge,
Mhm.
right? Which is why I think you're saying, like, I can't fix the whole problem. Obviously, none of us can.
Mhm.
And you just deal with your immediate environment. So how
Mhm.
do we deal with that immediate environment? Where does that conversation begin? What does that meaningful engagement look like?
Yeah. For me, it just means making the effort to build relationship with people who I may not feel comfortable doing that with at first. Um, for some Black people, I'm quite comfortable right off the bat. You know, it's not a big deal if we have common interests or um, if we come from a similar economic background. But for other Black people who may come from different social or economic background, I think it takes more effort. Um, I, yeah, I just try to build some sort of relationship. Um,
And where can that happen most likely? I guess that either begins to happen in school for kids,
yeah,
or or we or it begins to happen in our workspace,
yeah,
which I guess is beginning to happen a little bit in the church that you're in. I mean, is that something that you would discuss with Black members of the church?
yeah. We've talked about it. We've talked about it.
I mean, it would be interesting to know why there are so many churches in Barbados. Why would Black Barbadians want to enter the living room and be part of a minority when it's, you know,
They don't have to be.
yeah, they don't have to. There's so
Yeah.
many options. So,
Well, I guess that's why they're
Ma-
not there.
right.
I guess that's why they're not there. I don't know. I mean, the only thing the living room offers that the gazillion other churches out there don't is that we organize around small groups and homes. And so we really emphasize building close relationships. Um, and I think that's powerful in this context because when you invite, you know, if you're white and you have a Black person to your home, that's a big change. You know, a lot of Black people have never been in a white person's home. And maybe the vigilante movie was based more on some stereotypes of what a white person's home is like than actual knowledge of it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I know Marcia's husband, Dave, when he visited one of our members' homes, he said it was the first time he'd been in a white person's home. So, and the cast of that movie, because they traveled together, had a lot of really good conversations, a lot of good open conversations about race. So I think that was healthy. But they said, you know, it's amazing how much we assume we know about the other race based just on stereotypes.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and I think that part of what I'm trying to do in the White Creole Conversation project is to challenge those stereotypes and to really think about ways in which we can move beyond prejudice and beyond the stereotypes, um, and to be more actively engaged with that. Um, okay. I mean, I guess maybe we've spoken a little bit about, you know, the idea of, I guess they're contradictory feelings about both feeling that you belong or you don't belong at the same time. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to say about that.
mm-hmm. I kind of said all I have to say about
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say? No? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
that. Mm-hmm.